How can love ever be an abomination? Troy met with my uncle in Tulsa, Oklahoma in November of 1981. In June of 82, 6 months later, my uncle drove out to a country road 15 miles northwest of Tulsa. Newspaper accounts from the time say that his car was seen in the early morning on a Wednesday in Osage County, not too far from Pawhuska. Troy told me when they met in November, they met at the home of a local Unitarian minister, and my uncle was on the verge of tears the whole time, and pessimistic and heartbroken and worried mostly about his children. 6 months later, he drove out to a country road and was later found with a gunshot wound to his heart. I've read that a gunshot wound to your heart is not an easy, instant death, but a prolonged and painful one. He must have lay there bleeding in that car on that country road, his heart torn in two. He must have lain in his apartment night after night, a sudden bachelor whose wife said he could no longer be a responsible father, addicted as he was to Tussianex, prescription pain medicine. That day in June of 1982 was not the first day his heart was torn in two. I can remember when I was 7 years old, and my Uncle Ronnie had just passed, and I was taking a walk with my mother near our suburban home in Denver, tumbleweeds blowing in the wind, and I was talking about school, and I said something like, "Mommy, strawberry shortcake is gay. She's so gay." My mother had just lost her gay brother to suicide, and my parents knew at some level that I was already showing signs of being an awful lot like my Uncle Ronnie. And so she stopped, and she looked at me seriously and asked me if I knew what gay meant. I said no and looked at the ground. My mother proceeded to tell me that gay meant when two men have sex with one another, and that God hates it so much that he burned up entire cities because of it. I knew at that moment that gay had something to do with me and the way I looked at Bo and Luke, and I also knew, or was told anyway, exactly how God felt about people like me. Several months later, my parents continued to try to change what they saw as early signs of my Uncle Ronnie. One day we took all the stuffed animals in the house, which I used to line up in rows in the living room and have tea parties with. And we put them all into trash sacks, and we drove the 10-minute drive to Goodwill and gave them all away. My brother's favorite was a little koala named Jerry, and I saved Jerry for him under the back seat of the Suburban, and we kept him hidden in the closet. Until at age 12, when I no longer wanted stuffed animals, my mother bought me a monkey she'd seen at the mall. But by then it was too late. My little heart, my brother's koala, they were hidden away in the closet, ashamed and torn in two. When I was in LA, I visited some of the places I remembered from my childhood. We often took I had a strange family. We had a family jet, and we'd take it to California and stay at one of Oral's houses, either the one in Rancho Mirage in Palm Springs or the one off Rodeo Drive in Beverly Hills. So I drove past Jacopo's, the little Italian place in Beverly Hills we used to go for lunch when I was a kid and we were in LA. I went to the beach in Santa Monica and laid out on the beach, remembering that the last time I was there as a kid and how we went after our time at the beach to McDonald's, and I ordered 10 cheeseburgers and ate every single one, very proudly. Lying on that beach, I thought about all these things. Gabriel Gillette, thinking along similar lines, in 1890 wrote this: "Years and years I have loved you and dared not speak my love. Your face was a light to lead my feet to the crowns of the heavens above. Lean closer, kiss me again, for this is the heaven of love. Years and years I have waited and gazed at your face from afar. Set in the dim, wide night of my soul, a tremulous silver star. Lean closer, love is diviner now, that the way to his shrine was far. Years and years I have feared the shame and the cruel speech of this world. But over our heads in the darkness now is the banner of love unfurled. Lean closer, cling to me, kiss my lips. Our love can despise the world. I was daydreaming on that beach in Santa Monica last summer, and I fell asleep for a while, not a smart thing to do, and woke up with a sunburn and stiffly walked to the car. And driving away, I noticed I was on a street called Montana, and remembered that even though I hadn't seen her for 15 years, that this was my aunt's street. And then, lo and behold, there was her apartment building, and I was pulling up along the curb, and I was stopping, and I was walking towards the door as if in a dream. My aunt's apartment, because it never had any children, was one of those rare living spaces that can afford to be all white. Everything in the apartment was white. The carpet, the couches, the walls, everything. My children would destroy it in about a minute. As I walked toward her apartment door, the blinds were halfway open and I could see in just a tiny bit. And there it was, all that whiteness staring back at me. My aunt was and is an evangelical Christian. And I stood at her door and found myself unable to knock. I guess sometimes you can be brave enough to stand up in a church somewhere like Minnesota, but still not brave enough to knock at your aunt's door, too scared she will turn you away. And I want to ask of all of you this morning, is your door open to every member of your family? Are you willing to honor and respect the love any of your family members feels? Are you prepared to say yes when your gay niece or your gay uncle or your gay friend or your gay coworker comes to you and asks you to allow them to marry the person they love? They may not be brave enough to ask you, so I am asking for them. Please. There's a story in the Gospel of Mark, chapter 2, about a little old man who wanted to be healed. He couldn't get off his cot, but he heard that Jesus was in town and that Jesus was a healer. Friends came by, took the sides of his little cot, and carried him through town to the house where Jesus was supposed to be. But when they got there, the house was so full they couldn't get in. They pulled him, cot and all, up to the roof and proceeded to lower the man down. And Jesus forgave the man his sins and told him he was healed and he could take his cot and walk home. 2,000 years later, there is a class of people in America who, like this little old man, are looking for another kind of healing, a political kind of healing. My people, as it were, homosexuals. People whom my grandfather Oral Roberts and most of his generation described as an abomination. How can an abomination desire healing? Gay men and women are knocking at the door of the president, of the Senate, of the Congress, impatient, hoping to get in, hoping for that healing. They are even, at this moment, lowering down their little pink cots from the rafters in capitals across the nation, insisting that their voice be heard. How can an abomination desire healing? We can sit and debate endlessly whether or not God sees homosexuality as an abomination. It seems that he may have in the early years of the founding of the nation of Israel. But then Leviticus says that God described the eating of shellfish and the wearing of two different cloths as abominations. We could debate what Jesus meant when he said that the old laws set down in those early years were finished and could be better summed up in one single new all-encompassing law: love thy neighbor as thyself. We could sit and talk for years about whether this love extends to homosexuals, whether you can love the sinner but not the sin, whether or not telling these gay men and women they are going to hell is part and parcel of the good news Jesus came to earth to deliver. We could have this debate. But meanwhile, this same group, these gay men and women, will be clamoring and begging for political healing. They will be dying too often from suicide, unwilling to live in a world where this debate is more valuable than their well-being. They will be unable to visit their partner in the hospital, unable to legally marry the partner they have loved, for better or for worse, through sickness and in health, for sometimes 10, sometimes 20, sometimes 30, sometimes 40 years. There are men and women waiting today for political healing while the Sadducees and the Pharisees debate. I disagree with much of what my grandfather taught, but he was right about one thing. Healing is simple. It is about establishing a point of contact between a source of power and a person in need. There is a need for men and women of all faiths to reach out in healing to their gay brothers and sisters and welcome them as equal citizens with equal rights, no longer separate. It is time to be bold. It is time to look gay men and women in the eye and say, take up your cots and walk. Thank you.